Hello, residents. Welcome back to Dangerville. Today I'm joined with the other half of the channel, Jacob.
Hello.
And back again, it's Nate.
Hello, everybody.
So, today we're going to talk about the potential for the MonsterVerse in terms of directors and who we think should basically get a handle on the next production. Obviously, the first film was Gareth Edwards. The second film, Kong Skull Island, was Jordan Vogt-Roberts. The third film, Michael Dougherty and Adam Wingard just did Godzilla vs. Kong. Each film has their merits, their pros and cons. But today we're going to think about the future. We're going to hold our head up high and hope that everything turns out good. So, who do we think is the best director? And first off, let's just see what Jacob has to say.
Oh Lord. Well, here's the thing, everyone. Just so you know, I am not the biggest director knowledgeable sort of person. I'm kind of sure I've heard of the main ones and the famous ones, but I don't really look at a movie for the director. Sorry, directors out there. You do good work. So, but thinking about this realistically, I'm the type of guy who would go and say, I'd love to see, a big famous one, like James Cameron or Peter Jackson or any of those guys doing it. Obviously, they're badasses with decades of experience. They'd probably make a movie that we'd all more than likely enjoy. But that's not that's a little too easy, I guess you could say. So I quickly, you guys brought up a good point before we started recording this. What's the style of movie that you would like to see a future MonsterVerse movie, and then find the director there. And so, two movies over the last 5, 6, I don't know, let's just say the last decade or so, two movies that have, stood out to me that I would like to see a MonsterVerse movie come into play are The Revenant, that was directed by, let's see, what's his name? Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu. I think I did that about as good as I could possibly do. And so the reason why, I'd like to have him do it, as well as the director of the recent Mad Max Fury Road. Now, both of these guys, they could have crappy movies that I don't even know about. I don't know much about them. But what I would like to see in the next MonsterVerse film is, everybody's like, we don't need humans. I'm not going to go and say that. But I would like to have less human stuff. And they made movies to where there's not really much dialogue at all. I'd love to see a human character that's going through this horrible hell, and he doesn't really have anyone to talk to because there's monsters around, like The Revenant. You just follow Leonardo just the whole movie, and there ain't much dialogue. There's a few spots in between. And then the same way kind of goes for Mad Max Fury Road, to where it's really just a lot of visual, body acting more than just let's try to throw in all these crazy scenarios and talking points and blah, 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 blah.
But there is a lot of crazy scenarios in that film.
Good point. Well,
But they do it without talking a lot, to be fair. It's beautiful visual storytelling.
Yeah, crazy, sit in a room and talk about, all this stuff. That's sort of, human scenarios, I guess you could say.
None of the prequels, Star Wars prequels stuff, where it's just sitting in a room and having a meeting.
Yeah,
Well, don't forget about walking in hallways and talking about
Exactly.
Yeah, don't forget.
Exactly.
those are the best parts, man.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know what these guys have done really much outside of those two movies, but those are two movies that I've really enjoyed that have come out.
Well,
and
George Miller is the one that did Mad Max Fury Road, but that's not his best film. His best film is actually Happy Feet and Happy Feet 2.
Oh, those are great movies too.
That's actually
those are great
fact.
movies. So and they're animal.
Yeah, forget Frodo Baggins. That was Elijah Wood's best role.
Well, there you go. And he already has the experience. Animating the creatures. That's the Penguin movie, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. There you go. So, that's kind of how I would go about it because, I kind of like the idea of a Godzilla movie that doesn't have a bunch of humans talking, but yet still has them in it. And I feel like those two directors have nailed that in the last decade, so maybe they can nail it again.
Well, that's the thing. George Miller, obviously, Max is practically mute. And my ideal sequel for, a MonsterVerse sequel would be Gia and Kong having an adventure in the Hollow Earth, and Gia, she doesn't speak apart from sign language.
Exactly.
And I think probably a perfect person to do that would be George Miller.
Well, we're on the same page, Cool. Well, hell yeah.
Right. What directors, Nate, do you think should get a chance to make a MonsterVerse film?
All right. Well, when choosing my directors, I was interested in directors who could manage and deliver on world building, because, like I said in our last video, there's opportunities to build upon this hypothetical, fictional Earth. You have got Hollow Earth, monsters running around the center. You've got monsters running around the surface, and you've got monsters coming out of space and wrecking all of our stuff and
It's all over the
taking
place.
control of monsters. So we've got all sorts of monsters going on here. There's no shortage of monsters. So I want to see what that world looks like. And a couple directors that come to mind. Robert Rodriguez. Now, he's best known for the Spy Kids films, as you guys mentioned. I kind of forgot about that. But he's also known, yes. He's also well known for Alita Battle Angel, a recent success. Maybe not as much financially, but for the fans and for the viewers who saw it, it was, in my opinion, a fantastic sci-fi movie.
Which was probably his biggest film, right?
I would. Oh, definitely. Yeah, in terms of budget, scope, and the special effects that they had to budget, I thought it was a very elegant and respectful telling of the Alita Battle Angel story. And that movie gives you a truly complete story. It gives you a true understanding of who these characters are, their place in this world, why things are the way they are. It's full of action. It's got romance in it too, and it's kept light for the most part. But then the tonal shifts make sense. We know when it gets more serious and we have to focus on the mission. I think that he would be a good candidate to do that, because I know that you said you don't necessarily want a movie where it's just people, but people need to feel invested in the story, and that's typically why there are human actors at all. People need something to relate to, and it's hard to do that when it's a giant alligator head staring right back at you, and, fighting giant bugs and stuff.
He's a passionate man. He obviously cares about the source material, so he
actually
gives a shit.
That was another criteria. It's not a very well known in terms of the West, Japanese property, but it's a manga that is very well respected in Japan, and he went so far as to even keep the large eyes. I would be up for him to see what he could do with the Godzilla franchise, or just a kaiju movie. Let's see what he can do.
Yeah,
and to a similar vein, Doug Liman. I don't know if this is his most recent, but the most recent film I saw from him was Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. It was a film that did not do very well financially, theatrically, because of what I would agree was sort of a marketing mishap. That people thought it should have been called Live, Die, Repeat, because that was the slogan. But it's based on a manga called All You Need Is Kill. And there were deviations from it, I thought, I guess to make, add more Western sensibility to it. And I thought, that's okay. But that movie is a very sophisticated, fun sci-fi movie, dealing with time travel. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do. It's a very underrated sci-fi film. But that is also an example of his ability to tell a complete story in one film. Okay, complete story in one film to allow for heavy characterization. You really become invested in what Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are doing. You really want them to win. You begin to care about it. The stakes are really high, and the special effects are really, really well done. I think that for a similar reason as Robert Rodriguez, he could handle it, but Doug Liman definitely erred more on the side of serious. There was humor, but he does better with the more serious tone, I think, in this case. Whereas Robert Rodriguez in his Alita Battle Angel endeavor was a little more lighthearted. And I think that both are acceptable. But if we're talking multiple movies, but with a singular continuity, I would love to see both of these guys be given a shot. And my last director, and I said I don't know if I'll mention this, but I think I'll throw it in there. I would be interested to see what Gareth Edwards could do now.
Yes.
I know that Jacob really likes the 2014 movie, and I'm not saying that's a bad movie. I just thought it was a little tone deaf. I don't think that the director and the corporate brass understood, tonally speaking, what kind of movie they wanted to make. And with that in mind, we invested full on into the zany aspects of tokusatsu with the 2019 movie and with Godzilla vs. Kong. They've committed to at least for the most part, they've committed to a tone. And with that in mind, because you have the benefit of hindsight now, I would be curious to see what Gareth Edwards could do. I'd be interested. I would give him another shot.
Well, that's the funny thing that I was thinking about. Is I love Gareth Edwards. I'd like if my dreams would come true, he would have directed all of them, and it would have been tonally, consistent like the Dark Knight trilogy. But that's not what we got, and I'm happy we got a bunch of different films from different directors' visions, and that's partly why I love it. It's like a jukebox of different styles each time. But if we got Gareth Edwards one, then fantastic. But what's his place now? Would he be able to make one? Would he have to regress, or would he have to go outside his comfort zone to make something a bit more wacky and wany? Even with something like Star Wars, he was like, okay, let's make it gritty and grounded to most extents. To the point Disney was like, all right, we've got to add a little bit of humor into there because you've made it kind of dry.
Yeah, and then Gareth Edwards is like, you literally gave me a movie where the entire cast dies. What do you expect?
Yeah, so I'd love to see him have an opportunity again, but it is a case of where does he fit in? Has the MonsterVerse moved on without him? Obviously, he's the daddy of it all. He's the only reason we're here with these films today. But, is it possible to bring him back?
No, but if it was up to me, I would hear him out. I want to see what his value proposition was.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I like the movie. Al loves the movie. We really like it, if he could come back and kind of, take what, the more recent MonsterVerse films have done, kind of making it more monster focused and more like in your face, but then having it in his nice tone that he created. I feel like that'd be awesome because to this date, his movie is the only one that still feels like it could happen in a real life scenario. From there on out, it started getting kind of, started throwing in like goofy jokes and stuff in all the movies and stuff. And they became actual movies where his almost felt like a documentary. So yeah, I'd like to see either one of those two come back. And I think they would come back and probably make something even better than what they made the first time because now they have the knowledge.
So as for my directors, though, the first thing on my list is Gareth Edwards. So what I'm going to do is I've got three people that are like the dream team, the people that like everyone probably imagines and would love, but is unrealistic. So Gareth Edwards is my top because he's probably one of my favorite directors in a way. I love his style. I love his like dark and gritty, atmosphere that he gives off. It's unlike any other film really, and Godzilla 2014 is still in my eyes a bloody masterpiece. I love that film and I'm probably quite biased, but so yeah, Gareth Edwards I'd love to come back, but it is a case of like I was saying before, where does he belong? Is it possible? Probably not. The second on my list is Guillermo del Toro, Pacific Rim. I think his style you could probably perfectly transcribe to, the tonally after Godzilla versus Kong. You'd be able to fit right in.
I agree with you there. I feel like I feel like Del Toro really wanted to make a Godzilla movie, but I'm not saying he settled for Pacific Rim, but I feel like that desire is there. And, in his private life, he's a big fan like us. And I'm not saying that's a prerequisite. A good movie is a good movie, regardless by who makes it. But to know that passion is there and that his ability to, scale up and make it, make a story that, relates to the human perspective and how we would deal with giant monsters. And in this case of Pacific Rim, we have a case study there. That's a fun movie. That's a totally the theme and tone of that movie is just pure fun. It's like, imagine if you were a Power Ranger in real life. What would that kind of be like? This is sort of how I would address that. I think he would be a great candidate.
He's a fantastic visual director specifically. He gives everything so much style and fun basically, which is you can feel the difference from him and the guy that came in to do Pacific Rim Uprising. The little things, I watched that film, like the whole floor in the Jaeger in the original Pacific Rim being like this mechanism that attaches to your feet and moves along. You can see all the details, and Uprising, it's just a floor. It's just a blue floor.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not fun or interesting. There's nothing fun or interesting about that at all. And they just fly around the place and they're not actually attached to anything. But yeah, I think he'd be perfect. Get him on, make a Hollow Earth film, fantastic. But
Yep.
Last on my dream team list is probably Peter Jackson. I think
Oh, wow.
we know we've got enough. We know enough about that man. He's directed some of the greatest films ever made. He's done the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the remake of King Kong. The man knows action, wide action, in and out.
Story building, like what Nate was talking about. Like, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he would be my pick, but I'm a fanboy of Peter Jackson. He's the only like director that I kind of get hot and bothered for. So that's why I didn't want to really talk about it too much.
Well, he's an undeniably amazing director. He's probably just a bit too expensive.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. At this point, yeah. I mean, he's reached George Lucas status.
Yeah.
You know, to get him on your project would require an arm, a leg, and your firstborn.
I remember watching Godzilla vs. Kong, and even on the Hollow Earth bit, and they're exploring, the wide open region and the whole adventure aspect of it. I remember watching it and being like, this is like Lord of the Rings, but with giant monkey.
With like the epic cinematic, yeah.
This is giving off that vibes, yeah.
Yeah, with the the dramatic landscape shot like that Peter Jackson does.
A bit, yeah, I can see that.
For Lord of the Rings, I mean, he did that better than everybody. Like, he know how to make people walking look really epic.
Yeah, you give him the film and he's going to be like, right, we're filming it in New Zealand.
Yeah,
like, no, we're
they did a fair amount of walking, but thank God they weren't talking about politics.
All right.
But on my list of slightly lower, smaller indie film directors, which has been traditional for the MonsterVerse, all the filmmakers that have directed the Godzilla films or Kong films have been independent directors, or at least the biggest film someone directed was Krampus. Yeah, the biggest film was directed by Michael Dougherty, and it was Krampus, and it was still a very, very low-budget film.
The MonsterVerse was their big break.
So first on my list is David Robert Mitchell, which is actually the director of It Follows. I don't know have you seen It Follows?
No.
I have several times. It's a very compelling story. It freaks you out.
It's a great horror film. Yeah, I think he's so good at tension and feel like something's always approaching, and I feel like you could apply that to something, saying involving giant monsters with something approaching or some impending doom. I feel like he could apply that knowledge to a kaiju film.
That would be good. I would love, because 2014 had that a little bit, but I would like to feel actually scared during a giant monster movie. I haven't felt that way. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever really felt scared. So, to make a MonsterVerse movie and make it actually kind of like intimidating and creepy.
And that's the thing, like, it might seem like such a far stretch from that in a kaiju movie. It's just it's a film about someone that follows you and has sex with you to death. But like Adam Wingard did You're Next and Death Note, which couldn't be any further from a kaiju film in itself. So it just shows that someone can go from one thing to another, and as long as you're a fan, you've got the knowledge to do it, and you're a director, you're knowledgeable in that. Just do it. I think they've got so much potential there.
Yeah.
The second on my list is, I hope I don't butcher this name, it's Andre Muschietti. He directed
Machete.
He directed the It films, It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2. And I was just thinking about the scene in which, the guy with an axe basically follows that kid. It's like the giant lumberjack with the axe is following the kid, and he's like storming and stuff. And also the bit at the end where Pennywise turns into a giant spider, and I was like, that's monster related. He's not a gigantic director, you could say. He's done some of these horror films, but you could definitely apply that knowledge to kaiju films, and they're scary. Again, scary. It's ticking both boxes: big things and monsters, and it's a horror film.
Agreed, that could be interesting.
And my final director here is, we'll speed it a bit up, is Danny Boyle. We all know who he is. He directed 28 Days Later, Trainspotting 2, excellent independent director. I guess technically independent, probably one of the most famous directors of all time. Great horror director, great at tension, fantastic screenwriter, and I'd love him to have a crack at something monster related.
There you have it.
So that about wraps it up for who we think could or should direct the next MonsterVerse film. Obviously, everything here is completely down to our own opinion. Yours might be completely different. Who would you want to be a director? Let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for coming on my conversation. Not coming on my conversation, but thanks for coming to this conversation.
God dang, we're on King of the Monsters level jokes here now, folks.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Nate.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you, residents, in the next one.
Later.